Welcome back to the Elev8 podcast. I am Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. If you checked out any other previous episodes, thank you so much. If any of them have brought you value, please share them, share some comments, let us know what has been vibing with you. This episode, I've got another great guest, this amazing woman. She's a neuroscientist, yoga teacher, mental strength coach, triathlete, and a mom. You can visit her website at dayagrant.com. You can find her on Twitter at Dr. Daya Grant and Instagram at dr.dayagrant. Let's dive into the brain and talk a little mindfulness with Dr. Daya Grant. So tell us a little bit more of your journey and about your practice.
Sure. It's certainly been a journey. I won't take you all the way back, but I was a serious ballet dancer growing up. And although my mom encouraged me to take yoga in high school to help with my flexibility, I didn't actually take my first class until college, sophomore year at Pomona College. And I was hooked. And I said, why didn't you tell me about this earlier? 2 years after graduating college, I did my first yoga teacher training. And that sort of launched that path of my career. College was also where I learned about the whole field of sports psychology. So I majored in neuroscience, and for my senior thesis, I combined my love of sport with neuroscience and wrote a grant proposal studying the effect of pre-competition anxiety on basketball performance. So that was the first time I realized that this whole field of human performance is fascinating. And I decided that I wanted to make a career out of it. I didn't totally know how to do it yet, as most college kids can understand. But after doing some research, I landed at Cal State Fullerton, where I got my master's in sports psychology, had the amazing opportunity to study under Ken Ravizza and Tracy Statler. And I really learned there how to apply sports psychology to the field, work with athletes, and we just got into it those 2 years I was there. Towards the end of my time at Fullerton, a couple things happened. One, I started to miss neuroscience. I love psychology, but I wanted to know, okay, what's happening at the neural level? Talk to me about cells. I just wanted to nerd out a little bit more. So, at the same time, the concussion epidemic, if you will, was starting to gain traction in the media. So, my second stop in my grad school journey was at UCLA, and that's where I got my PhD in neuroscience. And I really went in there just wanting to study one question, and that was, how do repeat concussions in adolescence affect or perhaps accelerate, Alzheimer's disease? So I went into the program with that very specific question, and I left thrilled that I got to add a brick to that whole field. But I also had the realization that I really like working with people, and I'm not a lab rat, it turns out.
Yeah.
And I'm just fueled by the direct engagement with people. And I found myself teaching a yoga class and being more fulfilled after a single yoga class than I was a year of studying proteins. And I just felt, for me, the academia is not my path. So now we're here, and I essentially combined my knowledge and experience with sports psychology, yoga meditation, neuroscience, and that all of those things have formed the foundation for the work I do with athletes.
Fantastic. You mentioned there a bit leading into the second question, working under Dr. Ken Ravizza. What's one of the greatest lessons you took from that experience?
Man, that is a nearly impossible question. Because Ken was so much more than a teacher to me during those 2 years. He was a mentor during my time at Fullerton, and then became a mentor just in my life. So yeah, I can rattle off a few Ravizza-isms, as we call them, as I'm sure you know, and a lot of athletes know, control the controllables, flush it, attitude is a decision. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. But the one that probably embodies Ken the most and really permeates every aspect of my life is be where you need to be when you need to be there. He was the guru of presence. And not only did he teach us how important presence is for peak performance, but he taught me that presence can really cultivate joy. Presence cultivates peace in relationships. And he demonstrated that, like he really lived it. And when you talked to him, he made you feel like you were the most important person in the world. And it's hard to distill his lessons down into one greatest lesson. But I think, and as Michael Gervais, who I know you had on the podcast the first season, as he affirms, like, if we can be present more often and if we can teach that to others, then we'll have happier people who are more productive. And I'd add that that will actually contribute to a better world for all of us to live in. So for me, it comes back to the breath and being present. And I really thank Ken for that lesson.
Fantastic stuff. You touched on your early career in ballet and dance. Little known secret, I took ballet until 6th grade. So
amazing.
Going to be out now, but my mom attributes that to me having good footwork in football. So
heck yes.
You know, back to you being an athlete in some of that ballet, and I know you're a competitor now. Was there a coach or teacher along your journey? I know we talked about Ken, but anybody else that really, through your athletic experiences, really impact or influenced you on a greater level?
Yeah. So now I got into triathlon 6 years ago, but yes, growing up, it was all about ballet all the time. Like I was very serious about it, and I had the opportunity to train with a lot of incredible teachers around the country at Houston Ballet and Joffrey and Juilliard. But two that really had a profound effect on me were Alonzo King and Carol Mead. And Alonzo is the director of Lions Ballet, which is based up in San Francisco, in my opinion, the best dance company in the world. But I would take his class growing up whenever he guest taught and whenever he came down to San Diego, where I grew up. He saw me, like he saw my spirit as a dancer. He saw my passion. He saw my drive, and he wouldn't let me settle. I was really, really shy growing up, and that translated into my dance. And he would tell me repeatedly, you need to dance bigger, like take up more space, as Ken actually said a lot too. Take up space, dance bigger, like let your light shine. And you've got to perform to the people who paid to sit way up in the nosebleed seats. Like you've got to perform for all of them, and you can't do that if you're kind of stuck in your little body. So he really encouraged me to be comfortable in my own skin and to express myself through my art form. And then Carol Mead continued that for me. She was a former Martha Graham dancer, and she introduced me to modern dance in high school. So I had come from a very traditional, rigid ballet background. And in high school, I started to realize, there's a different way of moving. And she also saw my potential, and she pushed me out of that ballet box and ultimately helped me get into Juilliard for a summer, and really helped me realize my peak as a dancer. Like it's kind of crazy in dance because you obviously do it when you're much younger, and career as a dancer ends pretty early. I decided towards the end of high school that I wasn't going to do this professionally, and I decided not to go to Juilliard for a dance conservatory program. But I was able to tap into kind of what I was searching for. I think the whole duration of my dance career, and that was the ability to really express myself. And now I just take up more space everywhere I am because of those two teachers.
I love it. You touched a little bit early on about the concussion epidemic in kind of flipping modes into when you look at youth and high school athletes today, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change about the environment that youth and high school sports are in?
Oh man, sports is so important for kids, for high school athletes. I mean, it's all rooted in play, right? And that's something that as kids, I mean, you and I are both parents, we see our kids play,
Yeah.
and play then can become sport, and it translates into like more structured sport, but it's all rooted in play. So I think my personal philosophy is that the focus for youth and high school sports should really be on positivity and character building. We know the stats, right? Like
Right.
500,000 NCAA athletes, and less than 10% of those will go to play pro. And the number is closer to 2% for the big sports like basketball and football. So while I'm all for having hope and for encouraging kids to take their sport as far as they can,
Yeah.
I really think the emphasis has to be on having fun and developing as a quality human being who can appreciate discipline and teamwork and all of those incredible attributes that we gained as athletes. And then in terms of the concussion stuff, I think right now in this climate, there's a lot of fear mongering, frankly. Concussions are a serious issue, and the numbers are higher than we've ever seen them for a variety of reasons. At the same time, there's so much we don't know. So kind of going back to my doctorate program, the biggest research finding that came out of my work was that repeat concussions in adolescents, when they're spaced close together, not good. If you've had a concussion, as you have, it affects you cognitively. You may have headaches that persist for a while. Like, it's just not good. And when we look at long-term sequelae, there are consequences. However, the exciting thing and the hopeful thing is that when those concussions are spaced and your brain has time to heal and recover metabolically and symptom-wise, then you're actually okay in the long run. That's what we know so far. There's so much more data that's come out even since I finished my PhD, but the bottom line is there isn't a clear answer regarding how many concussions is too many concussions, if subconcussive hits are causing neurodegenerative diseases. There's just a lot we don't know. So what we can do is protect our young players. Like, if we suspect a concussion, we've got to pull them out. We've got to get them evaluated and create this culture where it's okay for athletes, young athletes, to say, I'm not feeling right. Something's going on. Let's get me checked out.
For sure. Great stuff. You mentioned earlier about your early yoga experience. My wife, well, at the time, she's my future wife, first got me into yoga several years ago. And as a former college athlete, I was like, why didn't anybody show me this? But one of the big things I learned from it too was just some of that breath work. Is there something for our listeners, a easy breathing exercise or something that you could share that you use with young or student athletes?
Yeah, this is going to sound so silly because it's so simple, but the number one most frequently used breath exercise in my practice and in my personal life is a single deep breath. That's it. Yeah, I learned how to meditate as a kid, and I went through yoga teacher training, and I learned all these incredibly powerful breathing techniques or pranayama techniques. But when I went to study with Ken, he really showed me that athletes don't really know how to take a good quality deep breath.
Yeah.
And so many times now in my practice, I'll have an athlete, like I worked with a baseball player yesterday, a college baseball player, and I said, okay, show me your deep breath. And he showed me a deep breath that was super shallow and super fast. And the point is not to take a deep breath for the sake of taking a deep breath. It's to actually change your physiology and your psychology, right? So a good quality deep breath will reduce your cortisol It will focus your mind. It will quiet the chatter that we all have all the time. And it's so powerful, and we just don't do it enough. That's one. The other one is alternate nostril breathing, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's kind of tricky to demonstrate, but there's a lot of information online. Basically, you breathe through one nostril and out the other, and then you reverse the pattern. So you breathe in through the left, out through the right, then in through the right, out through the left, and you have to close off one nostril at a time to do that. Yes. It's very hard to describe, but there's actually a lot of data to support its cognitive benefits, and I will teach athletes how to do that. Even just going through 10 cycles of that, which takes about 3 minutes, has pretty profound effects that are long lasting. So that's kind of the next level up. And there's so many others, but yeah, alternate nostril breathing and a single good quality deep breath.
Never underestimate the power of one, right?
Yes.
So we touched on yoga. What's one reason you'd encourage athletes today to give yoga a try? I work with a lot of football players that a little resistant, but why would you encourage any athlete to give yoga a try?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to meet athletes where they are, right? So for the football players, for the most youth athletes and college or high school athletes and college athletes, the goal is to improve their performance in their sport. So I'll talk about yoga and its benefits as a cross-training mechanism, right? So we know physically that it can correct imbalances that are inherent in every sport. It strengthens the smaller muscles of the body that are important for stability and injury prevention. It also improves balance and coordination and range of motion. And the list just goes on. And those are the physical benefits that will directly apply to an athlete on the field. And then once you get them hooked, you can start to show them that yoga has so many deeper benefits. So the psychological effects, the spiritual benefits, its ability to strengthen the mind-body connection, its ability to help athletes improve their focus and endurance and confidence, and all these things that student athletes really need to set themselves up for success, both in and out of their sport. I do have to mention one caveat, just because I am a yoga teacher that cares about the health of my athletes.
Yeah.
For any athlete that's interested in integrating yoga into their training, I highly recommend that they find a yoga teacher who is experienced and trained in working with athletes specifically. There are so many yoga teachers, which is amazing, but not everyone has experience with athletes. And that's critical for injury prevention. And an experienced teacher will also understand the physical and the psychological demands of the sport, which just further support the athlete and what they're trying to do.
I love it. Great. So go find yourself a good experienced yoga teacher and give it a try if you haven't. From all these things we started, talking about, kind of your ballet career and time. But if you could go back with all the things you've learned along that journey and go back and see 16-year-old Daya, what would you tell yourself?
Oh man, well, first I'd give her a big hug and I'd tell her that everything will make sense when you look back. And the biggest thing is everything happens for you and not to you.
Yeah.
And this to me is the truth at the center of resilience. And that's one of the most important qualities for mental strength, right? So I've always been a super optimistic person, but as I've gotten older and progressed through my career and just lived, I've obviously experienced challenges and disadvantages and traumatic experiences, but I just refuse to adopt a victim mentality. Life can be really rough, right? We know this. And there's no denying that or sugarcoating it. And Ken always encouraged us to teach our athletes to sit with that discomfort, and to feel it, like to feel those moments that really suck and are heavy and hurt, but then recognize that we have complete control over how we choose to respond to that and to any of life circumstances. So 16-year-old Daya, just look at everything, the good, the bad, the really ugly, as a gift, and see it as a way to evolve as a human being.
Awesome. Well, this insight has been fantastic. Last question I always love to ask and gain people's perspective on is, how do you view or define success?
Such a good question. This actually really caused me to think. For me, success equals service. So I think we're all here to help each other, whether we realize it or not. And I feel like my purpose is to lift people up. My clients, my family, my friends, total strangers, just lift them up and bring a little bit more light into this world. And ultimately help other people realize the light within them. If I can help people realize their own light and encourage them to relentlessly pursue their purpose, then I feel like I've succeeded. And in light of the great loss we experienced last week with losing Kobe, I've got to quote him here. So he said, and I'm abbreviating a little bit, but quote, "You have to dance beautifully in the box that you're comfortable dancing in. It's your job to try to perfect it and to make it as beautiful of a canvas as you can. If you have done that, then you have lived a successful life." So yeah, I've found my purpose and I'm dancing through it, and I'm hopeful that I can help others realize the same thing.